Well, this is Dave Gaddis, and today is May 12th, 2015, and this afternoon we're interviewing Kim Mikelson here at her offices at Olson & Olson in Houston, Texas. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
So why don't we start at the beginning and tell us when and where you were born.
Oh boy, I don't admit this to very many people. I was born in Alabama. Dad was in the Army, so I was born at Redstone Army. Missile range, I guess.
And so did you end up moving around a lot as a kid?
We moved around a lot.
So what were some of the places that you lived as a child?
Alabama, we got out of there as fast as I could convince my parents by my squalling. The East Coast, D.C. area, Italy, Germany. 1 year here, scattered places here and there. Mm-hmm. By the time I went to the University of Texas at the age of 19, I had moved 23 times.
Okay. So where did you end up graduating from high school?
Kaiserslautern American High School in Kaiserslautern, Germany.
Yeah, okay. And so where did you initially go to college?
I went to a small American school in Europe now called Schiller International University, and I went to the campus in Heidelberg, Germany.
Okay, and what did you study?
That was my first year of college, so I took general courses,
okay.
Not, just kind of the general stuff everybody takes their first semester.
And so after that, where did you go?
UT.
Okay.
Got to Texas as fast as I could.
Okay. And you sort of got back to Texas. I guess you had lived for a time in Texas?
We had lived for 1 year in El Paso, the year my dad was in Vietnam. My parents were originally from South Dakota. The name Mikelson, it's always nice to go back there. They know how to spell it up there. Because two governors have been Mikelsons, not related. But so they had lived there. They lived there and changed their residency the year my dad was in Vietnam.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, what did he do in the Army?
Him?
Yes.
He was an ordnance officer. Okay. He did nukes.
So that's why he was at Fort Bliss. So.
Fort Bliss, yeah, Redstone Army, yeah. Arsenal, Redstone, White Sands, Missile Range, yeah.
Been there, done that.
He did, yeah, he did missiles.
So you got to UT in Austin, and what did you end up deciding to study?
I was a Plan 2 major.
Which means?
Which means you plan to go to graduate school. It's a small liberal arts honors program, and so it's fairly competitive, I guess, to get in. I don't think I realized that when I applied. I stumbled on the program and thought this is what I want to do. And so I went through the application process and got in, and it's a very broad liberal arts honors curriculum, and they basically let you design and take classes in whatever you want to do beyond some core courses. Okay.
And if you knew you wanted to go to graduate school, what did you want to do in graduate school?
At the time, I thought I would do a law degree and probably a PhD in government.
Okay, so interested in government, political science side of it.
Right.
So you got your degree, a bachelor's degree. Did you go straight into graduate school?
I did, a week later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where at?
At UT.
Okay.
They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I got into the joint degree program in the law school and the master's program at the LBJ School of Public Affairs. Okay. When I applied to graduate schools, I applied only to those kind of joint programs. It was either joint law master's or joint law PhD programs.
And the master's part was in the LBJ school?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
So that continuing the study of government. And
yeah, basically. Yeah.
So did you end up doing a thesis or anything like that?
Yes. At the master's level, yes. Cause I did one. You do one in the Plan 2 program too. But so I did.
So what did you do at the Plan 2 program?
I did 2 at the Plan 2 program.
Okay.
I did one on the EEOC's employment guidelines on sexual harassment.
Okay.
I did one on Karl Marx and imperial colonialism and the concept of Asiatic stasis.
Okay.
And that's a term that really doesn't get you a job outside of academia. So.
And so at the LBJ school, what did you write on?
Well, that may be a giveaway to the idea that I was really fascinated with the Soviet Union and Marxist studies. That's really what I had done a lot of study in at the undergraduate level. So I did my internship actually in Krakow, Poland. And in 1984, when it was just, if you think back to Polish history, 1983 was when they were under martial law. So I went the year after martial law had been lifted, and studied there. I studied the institution of the procuracy, procuratura, and it's like an ombudsman. It's kind of a combination of an ombudsman, a problem solver, and a district attorney. And that's what I wrote my master's thesis on.
Okay.
So at the time, I was the ombudsman for the University of Texas at Austin. So it linked with what I was doing on campus, the problem-solving side anyway.
Okay. So did you end up getting both law degree and the...
I did.
Was it a Master's of Public Administration or...
It's called a Master's of Public Affairs at the LBJ School, but
okay.
Public Policy, Public Administration at other schools.
Okay. And you ended up getting that in what year?
86.
Okay. And then where'd you go?
I took the bar exam in February, found out I passed it in May, but by that time I was married. My husband was in the military. Frank was a helicopter pilot at the time. Same husband still. And he got stationed over in Germany. So that was fine. I went over and actually did some study with the University of Cologne and eventually University of Belgrade, kind of continuing that same idea of Eastern European interest. So, and then when we were over there, I started teaching for several American universities that were set up. This was not a traditional linear legal career, you know, getting carted over there. So I started teaching at University of Maryland, Boston College, Park University, a couple of others that had programs set up in Europe, you know, for military members and their family members.
And you taught primarily what courses? Types of courses?
Business law, constitutional law, American government, labor relations, kind of in the business and government areas.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, you have this interest in Eastern European government and politics. What did you ultimately think you wanted to do with that? Absent the military husband, probably would have been foreign service. Okay. We probably both could not have continued traversing in different areas, but yeah. So you're in Germany, and I assume at some point in time you came back to the States?
Well, we did. Eventually what happened in Germany is I took a job with, we were stationed up in northern Germany outside of Bremen, and I eventually took a job with really the Community Services Division, and I started working with them on basically doing some transportation planning. And in undergraduate school, I had taken several courses in urban economics, and having grown up in Europe, I was always fascinated with mass transit, and I can't understand still to this day why it doesn't work here in this country. But that was always my interest and what I actually applied to do PhD work in. But so I started working with them to facilitate transportation issues and routes with the Americans who were living off base with the German transit agencies and so forth. So it was kind of my first real job, and it was a planning job.
Okay.
So
you talked about applying to a doctoral program. Where was that, and what happened with that?
Oh boy! Well, that was when I was coming out of undergraduate school. I applied to 2 joint JD PhD programs, one at Cal Berkeley and one at University of Chicago, and I didn't get accepted at Berkeley. They accepted 3 people that year, and I keep wanting to go back and do an open records request to see who got in that year and what they're doing now. but then University of Chicago was ultimately just too expensive at the time, and I wasn't really sure I wanted to do the PhD part. So
that's why you went to UT.
And like I said, UT made me an offer I couldn't refuse. With fellowships and scholarships, I mean, I had no debt, so it was a nice way to do it.
Okay, so where'd you end up going after Germany?
After Germany, Frank got orders to go to Fort Bliss in El Paso, and I told him that I knew I had said I know I said for better or worse, but I'm certain I said with the exception of, and I was not going to go to El Paso. But I went and I loved it, and very dear to me.
Okay, and you got a job doing?
I got a job almost immediately with the city. What was really fortunate was when I went to law school, because of my interest in urban economics and transportation and community development, that was at the tail end of the time of a lot of the big public-private partnerships that had been done between HUD and particularly the Rouse Corporation and so forth. And so I knew that if I did practice law, I wanted to do it in that area. I wanted to be in the planning field. So I was hired at the city of El Paso and originally hired as their CDBG attorney. And I did that for about a year before David Kaler moved me up to, or assigned me as my client, the planning department. So that's where that went. And the rest is history.
Well, and a lot of it, planning law is kind of a small niche within the legal community. So it's kind of interesting that that's where you kind of ended up.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, and it's really truly what I knew I was most interested in and what I thought I would like to do.
Also kind of interested that the CDBG program had their own attorney, which maybe tells you something about how the program was going.
Right, right.
So how long did you end up staying in El Paso?
We were there for 5.5 years. Okay. And I was really fortunate. The planning department staff, not being technically trained as a planner, I either convinced them or pounded it into them, I'm not sure, but convinced them that I was, so interested in it they should teach me a lot. So they let me hang around and taught me probably everything I know about the technical parts of planning.
So who was the planning director and staff that you worked with?
Nat Campos was the planning director at the time. Roy Gilliard was, I want to say he was the assistant director. Eventually he moved over to the MPO, to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and then Pat Adauto were probably the top three, and probably the three who taught me the most. So I'm sure I'm leaving some people out.
Yeah, and what years was this?
Right? 90 to 96.
Okay. Any particular big planning or legal controversies at the time? Or?
El Paso's never dull. We had a big lawsuit over mountain development that was actually part 2 of the Madero development case. That went to trial. Actually, that went to trial the same month that El Paso hosted the New Mexico, Texas, Mexico conference. Is that 94, I want to say? And the trial was going on the same time the conference was going on. I have never been so tired in all of my life trying to do both, because I was section director and conference co-chair and trying a case, a takings lawsuit. So that was an interesting case. Sexually oriented business cases also were big out there. I didn't do much in the litigation end. My practice has always been more transactional, though I've gone to court a few times.
So you left El Paso because?
Frank retired. Okay. We got to El Paso, and literally, I think 2 weeks later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And so Frank went to Kuwait, and I stayed in El Paso, and by the time he got back, I thought, that's it. I'm not doing another one of those. So he took early retirement when the Clinton administration offered an early drawdown, and we moved to Dallas, where I worked with Bob Freilich and Terry Morgan. Mm-hmm. Now, back when I was coming out of undergraduate school and law school and thinking I want to practice, if I practice law, I'm going to practice in the land use area, I thought Rouse Corporation, Bob Freilich. I still think of Bob Freilich as a great god of land use law, even though he works for developers now. But so I went to work for his firm for a while.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about Freilich and maybe his influence over you?
Bob was professor at University of Missouri at Kansas City, was the longtime editor, I think that's right, in the law school. He was the longtime editor of, and may still be, of the American Bar Association publication on called The Urban Lawyer, which deals primarily with urban planning issues from a legal perspective. While in law school and while even in undergraduate, I had read a lot of Bob's publications, so he really was a big influence on me. I don't remember if both of his degrees are from Columbia, but he has a PhD as well as a law degree, a PhD in planning, and I thought, that's kind of cool, you can do both. So I worked for the Dallas office of his firm, which was based out of Kansas City. Bob also had a kind of a dual practice of, he had the law firm side of it and handled transactional as well as litigation matters, and then had the planning side of it as well. So
and you might talk a little bit about Terry Morgan as well. He's made a name for himself.
Terry has been a big influence as well. And, he's most well known, I think, now, especially for his litigation, the litigation work he does. I got to know Terry when he worked for the city of El Paso on the Madero, on the mountain development lawsuit. And probably really the first time I got to really work closely with both he and Bob Freilich. And yeah, so he taught me a lot about the litigation side of it. There were times when I'd be in the office and he would say, "Kim, go file a motion to compel," and I'd think, I don't know what that is, because I was not a litigator, had not ever really focused that part of it. So I enjoy working with him to this day. So.
Any major cases during your time there that stand out?
We were working on the Sunnyvale versus Mayhew case at the time. There was some work, although it was kind of at the time I left that they were really starting to work on the fair housing lawsuit with the city of Dallas. So did that. A lot of we handled a big annexation case with Parker and Wiley and some of the other cities in North Texas. So I learned a lot about annexation while I was there.
And so
annexation law.
How long were you at college?
Probably only about 18 months. Okay. Olson & Olson here in Houston, I had actually interviewed with them when I was in El Paso. And they had offered me a job then. They came back and offered me a position again, and I decided, they basically told me I could come and be the land use attorney for the firm. And I really did not like the courtroom. So that was mostly what I was doing in Dallas. So, so we decided to make the move here. Okay.
And you've been with Olson the whole time, or have you been off?
No, because, every so often I grew up moving. I can pack and unpack in my sleep. So sometimes you just have to move. So about 10 years ago, I actually moved to Chicago. I accepted a job with a planning firm based out of Mundelein, Illinois, then Lane Kendig Inc., now KKC, Kendig Keast Collaborative. Yeah. And they were opening an office in Chicago, and I kind of offhandedly said, "Oh, I like Chicago. We should talk." And so I moved up there and helped open that office.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about Lane?
Lane is best known for performance zoning, and has a big book out on it that I'm proud to say I have a copy of.
Yeah, I do too.
And yes.
And nobody uses it.
Yeah, I finally looked at Lane one day at a conference, and I said, "You have to explain this to me. I don't understand this chart of how it works," and maybe that's just me. But I know it's worked in Bucks County, and it's had some successes. So, and it was the part I enjoyed about working with them was the exposure to multi-state planning issues, getting to see how communities in other states consider ordinances, what their enabling legislation said, learning about some of the major cases in those other areas and so forth. So.
Now, you said partly why you moved to Chicago is because you like Chicago.
I love Chicago.
What was your relationship with Chicago before that?
None.
Okay.
None. None.
So,
no family. No. Just love Chicago.
So while you were with Kindig, any major projects that you worked on, or?
No, not really. You know, just assisting with some of the comp plans and unified development codes that the firm was doing. It was really, they were just starting to expand, so it was trying to get in business and things like that.
Okay.
A lot of business development.
As I recall, during that time, you also commuted quite a bit between.
Well, I still had clients here in Texas who just wouldn't let me go. Part of my agreement with Lane was that I could open my own law practice, basically, and that makes it sound fancier than it was. But it was an opportunity to just keep a foot in the legal door. And I had some clients who had told me they didn't want me to close up shop completely. So. So I still had a lot of work down here, and that over the next really year or so really mushroomed and grew into some big work. I was only with Lane's firm for a year. The work here, one of the clients who, when I left, that would have been 2005 that I moved to Chicago. And one of the clients, when I left at that time, was the city of Houston in the Houston airport system. And they were just initiating a project that it took a couple more years to really get underway, but they were initiating a project to really look at airport compatible land uses. We can't say airport zoning in Houston, but so they wanted me to stay on that project. And in about 2007, it really started picking up steam. Or as I say to people, it really took off, no pun intended.
So you did the work in 2007 still under your own firm, or did you go back to?
I did my own. I stayed with my own firm from 2007 until 2011. Okay. And commuted back and forth. I'd pick up special projects or some regular client business, but they didn't always need me present at meetings. Loved Chicago, loved being up there, the exposure to different planning practices, had some work up there as well. Liked the cooler climate in the summer, didn't mind the snow, so it wasn't such a bad thing, but just as work continued to pick up, and then I can get to the teaching in a minute, but a couple of other things have happened that it just necessitated my coming back. So we moved back full time really in about 2009.
And you did finally sell your house.
We did finally sell a house. That's the good news.
Well, you mentioned the teaching. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in 2013, I think it was, at the Chicago APA conference, I was sitting down with Shannon Van Zant to talk about the Guide to Urban Planning in Texas Communities that I'll say I've edited, but slowly over the past few years. So I was talking to her about that as a teaching tool and how to get that up to date, more relevant for campuses. And she mentioned that they might be looking for someone to teach planning law. And I said, without really a thought about where College Station actually was, oh, I will commute to College Station, that's fine. And I knew it was reasonably close. It really is not a bad commute. And so we started talking over that summer, and so then in late that fall, they asked me to come up and start teaching planning law, and then ultimately plan implementation and some other courses. So I'm doing that kind of part-time, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, it's kind of where I started out when Frank was in the military, was doing some teaching, and I loved being in the classroom. I loved that because I got to travel too, and but yeah, I like the interaction with students and molding young planners' minds. What do I want them to know? It's very fun.
And so as a die-hard UT fan, you don't have any problem teaching at A&M?
So I have this little car with personalized University of Texas license plates and, you know, a Longhorn on it, and probably at least once a month I get stopped by somebody who says, are you lost? And no, the thing, I went through decades of not wearing maroon. I wouldn't even accept a maroon rental car if I went away on business. I would make them give me something else. Once A&M went to the SEC, it's kind of really gone away. So I still see too many of the stickers with the horns sawed off. Mm-hmm. Like they ought to be worrying about the Alabama elephant with the tusks sawed off now, but that's, yeah.
Well, you mentioned the editing of the Guide to Urban Planning. You've also have published or edited quite a few books. Do you want to talk about some of those?
I was really, really honored when Mike McAnally asked me to take on working on the guide, and that's been, gosh, a dozen years ago, maybe longer, maybe 1990. And worked really hard in the early aughts, especially in the early 2000s, to try and get some of the chapters revised and up to date. And so working with Mike and Dick Lilly on that, you know, to really put out a publication that was used at universities, that was used by young planners or planners from other states maybe who, you know, didn't quite know the way we have to do things here in Texas. Used for educating commissioners and so forth, has just been a real honor. We went online with it about 4 years ago, and the University of Texas, this is how I get back from the A&M side, University of Texas library system has an online journal system, so they host it and keep that up to date. Ultimately, it provides us a huge collaboration tool electronically to even really make it peer-reviewed. So I'm really hoping to expand on that. The other thing that I really, and this again is how my conversation with Dr. Van Zandt started, was getting it more relevant back in the classroom. And I think having it available electronically helps with today's students. There's not one of them practically that takes notes by hand anymore. Everybody's got their laptop open or their iPad out or something, and I hope they're taking notes and not playing on Facebook. But
how about some of the other publications that you've been involved in?
You know, I have worked since its inception with the UT Land Use Law Conference. We just had the 19th annual Land Use Law Conference, and it's a program put on by the University of Texas Law School Continuing Legal Education System. And it started out as a 2-day course, has really morphed into about a 2.5-day course now, designed to be land use and planning law topics, primarily for lawyers. So we get a fair amount of planners, engineers, and other professionals in the land development field too. So the first time that it came out, I was with Freilich Morgan in Dallas, and we get this save the date brochure, and I called up UT and I said, why aren't, you know, we should be on the program because this is what we do. This is our boutique niche. This is exactly what we do. So so we've been involved really since year one. It's grown and grown. It's a great program.
Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about your involvement with APA.
Okay.
How did you first get involved? How did you hear about it?
Through an urban economics class as an undergraduate at UT.
Okay.
So I was a student member at UT, and wasn't terribly active. I didn't have a leadership role or anything like that. It met somewhat sporadically, and it was just kind of there. I think that was actually when I went to one of my first conferences, though, as a student member. So.
State conference or national?
State,
okay.
State, yeah.
And then after that, you've been involved?
After that, once we moved back to, it's hard to be involved in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
But so once we moved back to the States, when we moved to El Paso, I became very active with the West Texas section of the Texas APA.
And you said you were section director?
I was section director, I think, for 2 years, and I think I was, what do they call it, section chair? At the board level, so
okay.
Yep, and then conference co-coordinator, and so.
And then beyond that, were you involved in other sections, like the Houston section?
I was active in the Houston section once we moved here. I was not really active in Dallas. There was just too much work. Litigation takes a lot of time. But so no, once I moved here, I was active in the Houston section. I think I started off as the newsletter editor. And then eventually I was section chair here as well. And yeah, worked on getting speakers, putting programs together, been active with HGAC and TML both on doing their programs for elected and appointed officials. So. And
then other chapter offices, or?
No.
Until right now.
I was asked to run in 2013 when I was asked to run for president-elect, and I was, again, incredibly honored, but a little surprised. Just, probably people think of me first and foremost as a lawyer, so not a planner. So it was interesting. So yeah, I'm incredibly excited about it.
But at some point in time, you took the AICP exam. Do you remember when that was?
I did. I took that in 2000.
Okay. And where were you at then?
Here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was here. Part of it was just that the qualification process for becoming eligible to take the AICP exam can take a while. And since I was not educated formally as a planner and was not formally in a technical planning position, it took me several years to accumulate the kind of experience that the AICP board would accept. And but I just kept after it, and so I did. I took the exam, and part of it was I'm very proud of what I've learned about the planning profession and what I've learned in it, and hope it gives me some street cred since I lack the planning degree.
Okay. Well, as president-elect of the chapter, now you take office this fall?
This fall, at the end of the conference in Galveston in October.
You got any particular goals and objectives for your term?
Yes, and they are in the development stages at this point. We're having our board meeting the end of this month, the end of May, to really kind of set out our action plan. But there's been a big push at the national and even at the state level about encouraging younger planners to come up. And anytime I've been involved in an organization, I've always felt like it's important to have kind of that succession plan, or be a couple people deep about who next gets the call. And not that you know who gets it, but somebody else is coming up. Two areas that are of real interest to me. One goes back to the guide and the training courses that we've done, and maybe the fact that I'm teaching again, is I'm really interested in, again, getting the education, getting some of the training and services out to members in some of the other sections that may not always have the opportunity to come to the conferences. So part of my goal this year as president-elect has been, and I'm running out of time to get through them all, so this will carry over, but was to try and get to some of the other sections. So I've managed that with obviously some of them that are closer to me, but have on the calendar to head out to Midland and El Paso and McAllen here in the next couple of months for early summer. So again, to hopefully do some training, talk about what the organization really offers, why is it important that young planners and planning commissioners become a part of this organization? What can they gain from it? The other one really is somewhat linked to that, and I don't know yet how the board will react to it, but I'm really, really interested in focusing some more on advocacy at the state level. What the courts and the legislature here are doing continues to really concern me about the planning profession. So I know we can't lobby, that's a different issue, but trying to find that sweet spot where we can get the information out about the importance of planning is really important. So I'm looking forward to working with TML and that. And related to that too, I think, is the chance to partner with other organizations. Because if you find those links of common shared interests between the planning profession and some other organization, then I think there's strength in numbers.
Okay.
So.
You active in any of the divisions at APA, like planning and law, or?
Planning and law is the obvious one, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any other organizations that you're active in?
The State Bar of Texas. I think my term on the advisory board for Preservation Texas is coming up. At the State Bar of Texas, I'm a member of the local the Government Lawyers Section Council. So, Texas City Attorneys Association, I'm a member. Gotten out of Preservation Chicago, so that's too far to commute for that board meeting now.
How about any non-professional organizations, nonprofit work, or work that you might do outside of planning and law? You know, most of my interest, and that's where the historic preservation side has come from, has been kind of planning related, quasi-planning related. I am a member of, and not in a leadership capacity at all because I'm still trying to learn this, but I'm a quilter and fabric artist, and so I belong to the to SACWA, which is a art quilt guild, basically. So I'm active here in the Texas chapter. Beyond that, probably I'm a rabid Longhorn fan. So. Season ticket holder? Season ticket holder, go to all the games, yeah. Pretend I have the head coach's phone number on my cell phone, you know, yeah. As I recall, you bought season tickets somewhere else just to get a seat to a UT game? I did. Yeah. I did. I'm not going to be able to do that this year. So several years ago, Texas played Wyoming in Laramie, and we always wanted to visit Wyoming. And I just wasn't sure that my donor status would get us away tickets to that game. So yeah, I bought season tickets to the University of Wyoming. They still call me for fundraising. Texas plays Notre Dame this Labor Day in South Bend, which is going to be a hard ticket to come by. But I don't think I can get season tickets there as easily as I could at Wyoming. So that won't happen. Well, let's go back and talk about the influences on your career, mentors. I guess starting back with the LBJ School, any faculty members or people that served as a mentor to you back then? You know, John Gronowski was my thesis advisor, and Dave Eaton there at the LBJ School, who Dave really started the internship exchange program between the LBJ School and the Polytechnic University in Krakow that I was part of. So they were probably my two strongest there. The great thing about the LBJ School is I had the really good fortune of being able to take classes from Barbara Jordan and, you know, John Kenneth Galbraith, and I can't really count them as, you know, formal mentors, but certainly I took away a lot from the faculty. Any there. Students there at the same time that you kept up with? You know, what's very funny is there's actually a band of us from both the LBJ School and the law school who are now involved in various aspects of municipal work. Some of us were joint degree students, some of us were not. But as I got out into the profession and started reconnecting with people, they were
they just always showed up. So yeah.
Such as?
Stephen Polonsky, who worked for years with the Texas legislature, I think probably starting, and TxDOT. He was also a policy analyst at TxDOT, and is now with TTI. We still talk and hopefully will coordinate on some research projects. He finally got out of the madness that is the legislature and settled down. Some folks like Ron Stutz, who's an attorney in East Texas, up in Tyler. Terry Welch is a graduate of the LBJ school, did his law degree elsewhere, but is in municipal law. Both of them. Just blanking. Somebody from the city of Dallas, city attorney's office. It'll come back to me. Anyways, there is a whole core group of us, and in fact, I've talked to the dean at the LBJ school about how we should all get together and either do a class or do some sort of a seminar about kind of municipal governance and operations, at the state and local level. And
mentors in your legal and planning career? You talked about Freilich and Oregon.
I would say from law school. There were several, probably some. Professor Markovitz, who was originally German, went to, I think, Yale Law School, though, and originally from East Germany. And I took many of her classes, as you can kind of see that Eastern European thing going again. There may not be many of us who can say we took a class in Soviet law. That's so definitely Inga. Robert Hamilton, who was my contracts professor, was very supportive through law school and beyond. Yeah, very fortunate to have some very good professors there. I would say once I started practicing, the senior staff at the city of El Paso in the city legal department, David Kaler, Charlie McNabb, Monica Cunningham, were and continue to be good mentoring outlets for me. So.
Okay, and the flip side of that is, do you have any proteges or mentees?
I keep looking for a mini me.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a mini me.
Okay. Haven't found one quite yet?
I'm not. Lots of great, very good lawyers who are really interested in planning, but not as interested in the nitty gritty of it as I have been, maybe. Yeah.
Well, do you have any particular advice for a young planner right out of school?
Go to law school. No, teasing. And you say, do I have any mentorees? I have been fortunate. The firm, since I've come back, and we've hired. I'm now on my second planner here at the firm. The first one left to go pursue her PhD. So, because she's smarter than all of us, Elizabeth.
Who's that?
Elizabeth Garner,
okay.
And she has. So she's at Penn State, and I have recently hired a planner who has both her undergraduate and master's in the urban planning program out of A&M, Maggie Dalton. And I'm thrilled beyond belief to have her. So,
and other than going to law school, any advice?
Yeah, it's always hard. I think learning good research skills and being active and questioning about what other ways are there to do this. I tell people that in my practice, I try really hard to not say, no, you can't do this to a client, but I try to help them find a way to get to what they want to do. And I think that that's probably as applicable in the law as it is as it could be in planning. So,
is your practice primarily public sector or private sector?
It's public sector.
Okay.
I get lots of calls from the private sector, which is sometimes tempting, but yeah. Yeah, when I was out on my own, I did a little bit of private sector work. But I still believe, call me Pollyanna, but I still believe I work for the good guys and we wear the white hats, and that's why the legislature makes me so darn mad.
So we've covered a lot of territory today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I can't think of anything. That was pretty thorough.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some secrets that we haven't uncovered.
Maybe in the unedited version.
And was it you and I that were talking about cars? What kind of car did you end up buying? You were looking at a sports car or something?
Yeah, I'm a Bimmer head, and because I went to high school in Germany, my father owned an older BMW, model 2002, which is still the love of my life and favorite car. So I drive BMW. Sorry. And people think it's because I'm a lawyer. It has nothing to do with that. It's because I learned to drive in Germany on the Autobahn. That's why I like them. They're fun.
And what is Frank doing these days?
Frank, even though he retired from the military, I still make him work. And he swears that if we didn't spend as much on football as we do on Texas football, then he wouldn't have to work. But yeah, I'd have to get him out of the house anyways. But he's a business development vice president for a broker-dealer firm that is actually part of a subsidiary of AIG. So.
Well, I think
he
with
travels
that,
a lot.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Our pleasure.